Holy crap, it has been literally 45 minutes since I found my last target. After I found the biggest gold nugget of my life over in the Golden Triangle, I've come back home to the northeast of Victoria. The only mineral in this area that can sustain any kind of shape is quartz. So when the gold rush miners came through this area and tunneled down in their drift mines and took the wash off the bottom, the main constituent of their wash was quartz rock. And because there was no water in this area, they would build dams, just like this one here, so that they could wash their dirt in. Thing is, even though they would have got most of all the alluvial gold mixed in with that quartz, they would have missed specimens. Now there is no guarantee that this is a specimen, but I decided that I would work these waste rock piles and see if I could find one, and I've got a beautiful sound here. Stumpy! Oh, we moved it. The first rock I'm going to check is this big one because, again, that is quartz. Ooh, no way! You know, I had a hunch that it would be alright here, because I know that the old timers didn't have ye olde wooden metal detectors. So when they're washing this material, unless there was visible gold in a piece of quartz, you're not going to pick it up, because a piece like this sitting in the bottom of your pan or your rocker box, you're going to be like, oh, it's just a heavy rock, I'll yeet it out of the way. But I do decree it could be gold! And we know that because my ye olde metal detector is made from carbon fiber. That's definitely quartz. I can't see any visible gold, so I guess that's going to come home with me. And we're going to crush it up. Right, let's see if there's any more. Because I've literally only got a few hours on the Garrett Axiom, I'm still learning its ground noises and how it functions and whatnot. So I'm having to check a lot of targets end up either being hot ground or hot rocks. And it's been a bit tedious. I was actually getting quite frustrated with this machine there for a little while, until I went home and reviewed the footage from the first day I used the 6000, and I was having exactly the same problem. So it's just a learning curve. Ooh, this is a maybe. No, that's a target. Okay, it's in ground I haven't dug. Pretty loud. Probably a bit of iron, I'd suggest. If it is one thing that I can guarantee about the Axiom is that it is by far the deepest penetrating machine I have ever used. Probably pinging targets at maybe twice the depth that the 6000 is. There we go, finally. Yep, there we go. That's a chunk of nail. Don't get me wrong, I'm very aware that a lot of machines can ping targets that size at that kind of depth. It's just that the ease in which this machine has been doing it has been astounding, especially coming from the 6000 where, generally speaking, large targets deep tend to come through a lot softer. There's some of the rubble out of the way. Hopefully it's not a nail. I'm really hoping it's not a nail. I pulled out 3 so far. Yeah, that definitely sounds like a bit of junk, eh? Scoop, 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 scoop. It's big, so I'm really thinking it's going to be a nail. Is that it there? Please. Ah. Yep. More than a foot deep. More than a foot deep. That is a big old hunk of iron. Not a minute later, my luck's changed. Time is short today, so I'm moving away from my waste rock piles, and I have found several puddlers. This is where that quartz is actually coming from. You can see that outer ring, and it goes around that central mound. That central mound would have had a post in it. That post would have had a drive shaft cutting across the gap between the outer wall and the inner mound. They would have piled their clay-based wash dirt up in the center. They would have had a horse or a donkey that walked in circles around that outer ring with heavy drag chains that sat in this ditch here, and that broke apart the clay and they could wash their dirt. And that is why we have so much quartz here, because they would scoop everything out, process it, and their waste rock went over there so that their tailings dams remained empty so they'd still have water. Just up ahead of me right there is where their wash dirt was coming from. Deep lead drift mining. A deep lead is an ancient riverbed that's been buried quite deep down, like 100+ feet. They tunnel down to the bedrock, and then what they would do is start drifting it. And drifting it means working horizontal to the bedrock. So they worked in underground and they pulled out the couple of feet just above the bedrock, which is where the best wash dirt was. But that was often full of clay, and that's why they had those puddlers there. And so today, the remnants of what's left are just these piles of dirt. And sometimes if you're lucky, they threw a little bit of that wash dirt out into their waste rock, like this pile here, and you can ping little nuggets off it. I'm really not sure about that signal at all. It sounds like ground noise. I'm in a wet river channel, so chances are it's just a bit of junk. I just want to ping one little gold nugget with this that I can see, that I don't have to crouch. Oh my gosh. These are all puddlers. This is a puddler. This is a puddler. That there is a puddler. That there is a puddler. And there's more up on this hillside here. This one's a super neat one. Look at this. Look at all the rocks that they've thrown out of it up on the side. And then just massive central mound. Try to give you guys some scale. This thing is huge. This thing is massive. It just keeps going. Look at this puddler. Again, that puddler is wicked. It would appear we have a settling pond system going on here. This seems to be where they would be drawing water from. And there is another pond just here, linked by a channel. And that channel is connected onto another channel, which wraps around and comes up to the discharge port of this puddler. And look at this. Look at this. Oh, this is important. This is rare. The amount of bushfires that come through here usually destroy this stuff. This is the central post that they would have had their cross member on. It's still here. That is so cool. That is wicked. I've never seen a puddler with its central post still in place that hasn't been like replaced or restored by historical society or parks or, you know, a corporation. So an original post, that's wicked. So this puddler either discharged that way into that dam, or it discharged this way and it went downhill into a settling dam and then into a water recovery dam. I'm betting that's the cleanest dam out of all of them. Like that one and this one are still very muddy. So I'm thinking that dam over there is where they were drawing water from to run this. I've spent a lot of time in the bush. In fact, I spent most of my life in the bush between hunting and prospecting and camping, four-wheel driving, all that stuff. And what I've discovered is the best rule amongst all else is spend the time to look, because that's where your investment really is. You will find the best spots for whatever activity you're doing out in the bush by looking for it. Not hoping, not just committing to one spot. Look for it. I really didn't know where the signal was, but I can see it. I scrubbed the dirt off, I can see it. Man, if the Axiom is picking up gold that small, that is unfreaking real. Look at that tiny little speck. I'm slowly getting my head around the Garrett Axiom, and you can see here some of the targets that I managed to dig over our last session. So many of these targets were down extraordinarily deep, which I do like to see in a metal detector, including some of these big pieces of metal which were down over a foot. By the same token, this is stuff that I've picked up with the 6000 over the last month, including similar sized bullets. But the 6000 seems to have a lot more shotgun pellets, a lot more small shotgun pellets like this compared to the Axiom so far. I think it's worth showing you guys the responsiveness difference between the Gold Monster and the Axiom at this point. So our little piece of gold is right in that area there, the Gold Monster on. Now I run my Gold Monster in full auto 2, and that seems to give me the best stability for my coil. All right, so we're talking about an inch. Picks it up at about an inch. Pretty loud when it's on the coil. Now bring the gold monster up for one reason in particular. I thought everyone was going to ask me to compare the Axiom directly to the 6000, but a lot of people have been asking me to compare it to the gold monster. There's one really important caveat though, is that whilst this can detect small gold, it can't do it at depth. And I really mean that, because it's the difference of being able to pull out a piece of gold like this buried on other pieces of quartz and in the soil at 3 inches, whereas that will only pick it up at 1. I'm not entirely surprised that my hunch paid out, because if you think about it, quartz in this area is the only thing, it's the only rock hard enough to survive going down an old river system. And therefore when they puddled the clay away, that was the only rock left. And there's no way old timers with their wooden metal detectors are going to pick that up. So what I'm wondering is, do I go back? Do I go back with buckets and have a look at crushing a whole bunch of that stuff? It's a very weathered piece of rock too, so I'm not expecting heaps of sulfides in it. If it's been in a watercourse for a while, it's most likely oxidized most of those out. Ooh, that's a good little chunk. Actually, that's not bad at all. So that would have been, whoa, what? Wow, that bit was way big. Wow. That must have gone back and into it. That's confusing. That's really cool. There's a few pieces of very fine gold that came out of that specimen, but then we got a mad chunk of gold. It's really interesting seeing the different shapes from the different crushers. My RC1 crusher tends to roll pieces into a ball, but because of the way that the chains work inside the angle grinder crusher, it tends to flatten them out like that. I was not expecting a bit that big. I'm going to bet that's a 0.2 at least. Ooh, 0.14. So that there is like, what, $12 nugget? Go with the rest.